You don't mess with Maxine Waters. Steve Mnuchin, or the Snake as I call him, was called before the House Financial Services Committee to testify about certain practices and information that was requested of him. And when Maxine Waters started in on him, this snake tried to dance around answering the question of why he didn't respond to a letter that she sent to him approximately 3 months ago. And as is the practice of most witnesses that are Republican-based, i.e. the Trump administration, this guy attempted to filibuster her and burn her time. She was having none of it. What I'm going to do is I'm putting together a clip of pretty much her, Representative Moore, and Representative Ellison, so that you could see exactly how Mr. Mnuchin basically attempted to treat them with disdain and insult their intelligence. The first couple of clips are Maxine Waters. Here we go.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, Secretary Mnuchin. Mr. Mnuchin, as Secretary of the Treasury, you have a wide range of responsibilities that are of great importance to our economy and the well-being of the American people. These range from safeguarding our financial system to advancing U.S. values internationally. One bureau within the Treasury responsible for safeguarding our financial system is the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, or FinCEN, which, as you know, collects, analyzes, and disseminates financial intelligence in addition to suspicious activity reports, foreign bank and financial account reports, and other reports. FinCEN has numerous information sharing arrangements with foreign financial intelligence units, making the Bureau well positioned to identify and assist law enforcement in curtailing illicit activity. It is critical for the American public to learn the extent to which President Trump, his immediate family, and his associates colluded with Russia to influence the outcome of last year's election. Serious questions have been raised about their suspicious financial arrangements and involvement with Russian government officials, oligarchs, and organized crime leaders. As the Committee of Jurisdiction over Treasury and FinCEN, we too have our own share of questions. Fortunately, you as Secretary of the Treasury are well positioned to assist this committee in fulfilling its oversight responsibilities in assessing President Trump's financial entanglements with Russia. However, even though you have indicated, I think on more than one occasion, that you do take requests from members of Congress seriously, you did not respond to a May 23rd letter from me and my Democratic colleagues requesting copies of all pertinent financial records related to President Trump's financial transactions with and business ties to Russia, as well as those of his family members and associates. Now, I understand your staff finally did call yesterday afternoon while we were preparing for this hearing, but I'm looking forward to hearing directly from you about this matter today. There are also other areas where I have serious concerns. Indeed, in June, the Treasury released a report with recommendations that largely mirror Chairman Hinchland's Wrong Choice Act. You recommended gutting the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and rolling back important Dodd-Frank reforms, including rules in place to ensure the stability of our financial system, like stress tests and living wills. These recommendations are deeply harmful and short-sighted given the progress we've made since the financial crisis. I also remain very concerned about the practices that took place at One West under your leadership. Even though One West foreclosed over 36,000 families in California, and that It has been the subject of numerous investigations. This president has selected numerous One West officials, including you, to fill government posts. For example, Joseph Auntie, a former One West executive, has been nominated by Trump to lead the office of the Comptroller of the Currency, which regulates the largest banks. Committee Democrats are very concerned about the potential for conflicts of interest with regard to a recent Department of Justice settlement with One West and any pending investigations into One West for wrongdoing that occurred during your tenure. So I look forward to hearing from you and what you have to share with us today. And I yield back the balance of my time.
All right, the next person you're going to hear is Representative Gwen Moore, who is the ranking member for a subcommittee under the Financial Services Committee.
Thank you very much. I know I would feel a lot better, Mr. Secretary, if you support a strong, independent consumer financial protection bureau, especially given your reputation as a foreclosure king. I'm so disappointed that you and the Trump administration supported repeal of the extractive industry disclosures under Dodd-Frank 1504. And ironically, Treasury has just fined the agency for a crooked deal it did with Russia, while now Secretary of State Tillerson was its CEO. Finally, I've heard from state, USAID, and Treasury officials that Section 1502 conflict minerals provisions are working just fine. So I'm hoping that you will support 1502. I'm a very nice, sweet person. I hope to get to know you, but trust me, I'm going to fight you to the end to keep that in place. I look forward to your testimony.
Gentlelady yields back. Today we will welcome the testimony of the Honorable Stephen Mnuchin. State your inquiry.
First, I would like to know if this witness will be sworn in.
It is not our custom to swear in administration witnesses, and we did not do so with the Obama administration. It is not the chair's intent.
Well, Mr. Chairman, since you took time to talk about how we should conduct ourselves today, I'd like to remind you and your colleagues how you treated Mr. Cordray, and I never heard you take time out to talk about how members should conduct themselves. So while we have not done some things in the past and you're doing it now, I'd like to make sure I understand that you do not wish to swear in this witness.
I believe in my tenure we have sworn in exactly one witness, and we have never required Obama administration officials to be sworn in. It is not my intention to swear in this witness. It is simply my intent to profit from the minority's advice and counsel on decorum.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
All right, and I didn't play that particular clip, but what the chairman of the committee basically did was he told the various people on the committee that they really have to, quote unquote, use kid gloves and proper, quote unquote, decorum in asking this witness, Mr. Mnuchin, questions. So the ranking member, Maxine Waters, decided that she wanted to try to get this guy to swear before the American people that he was going to tell the truth, even though it's acknowledged that any testimony before any congressional committee is under oath. Now, this is pretty much the clip that you may or may not see because it's pretty much going viral on YouTube. But this is Maxine Waters really going after Steve Mnuchin, and she is not having any of his filibustering bullshit trying to burn her time without answering questions. Here we go.
Secretary Mnuchin, I want to make sure that we're all operating here with the same understanding. Even though you are not sworn in, do you realize you are under oath?
I do, thank you.
Thank you very much. Are you familiar with the May 23rd letter I sent to you along with several of my Democratic colleagues on this committee?
Yes, I am.
Do you understand that this committee not only has jurisdiction but a responsibility to oversee the activities of the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network?
Yes.
Given that the Treasury maintains these types of records, and given your department's statements that the agency takes responsiveness to congressional requests very seriously and is committed to providing useful and appropriate responses to requests from congressional members, is there some reason why I did not get a response to the letter that I sent May 23rd?
So, Ranking Member Waters, first of all, let me thank you for your service to California. Being a resident of California, I appreciate everything that
Thank
you've
you very
done
much.
for the community there.
I don't want to take my time.
I also have appreciated the opportunity to meet with
Reclaiming
you
my time.
several times
Reclaiming my
when we were
time.
doing our
Reclaiming my time.
The time belongs to the gentlelady from California.
Let me just say to you, thank you for your compliments about how great I am, but I don't want to waste my time on me. I want to know about the May 23rd letter. You know about it? Why did you not respond to me and my colleagues?
I was going to answer that.
Just please go straight to the
And
answer.
Mr. Chairman, I thought when you read the rules, you acknowledged that I shouldn't be interrupted and that I would have
Reclaiming my time. What he failed to tell you was when you're on my time, I can reclaim it. He left that out, so I'm reclaiming my time. Please, will you respond to the question of why I did not get a response, me and my colleagues, to the May 23rd letter?
Well, I was going to tell you my response.
Just tell me.
Okay, so first of all, okay, let me just say that the Department of Treasury has cooperated extensively with the Senate Intel Committee, with the House
Reclaiming my
Intel
time.
Committee, with the
Reclaiming my
Senate
time.
Judiciary
Reclaiming my
Committee.
time.
Okay?
Reclaiming
Matter of
my
fact,
time.
Mr. Secretary,
Reclaiming my
the time belongs to the gentlelady from California.
Perhaps, Mr. Chairman, I don't understand the rules because I thought I was allowed to
Reclaiming my time.
answer questions.
Reclaiming my time. Would you please explain the rules and do not take that away from my time?
We will give the gentlelady adequate time. So what I read, Mr. Secretary, were statements of the ranking member and Democratic colleagues on how administration witnesses should be treated, not necessarily the way they belongs to the gentlelady from California, but I assure you majority members will allow you to answer the question when it is our time.
Okay, so what I was saying is that we have provided substantial information. We believe there's significant overlap. And matter of fact, I would say that we spoke to your Chief Oversight Counsel yesterday. We have been responsive, and we are trying to coordinate with you the response, and we've suggested that you get the information through the other committees. But I would like to emphasize we believe we've been very responsive.
Reclaiming my time.
And
Okay, let me stop right there. Okay, what this guy just told her was that he wasn't going to respond to her. The information that she apparently requested was given to other committees, and he responded to other committee chairmen, but he didn't respond to a single ranking member, i.e. a Democrat, on any letter that they sent out. So he basically is telling her that she has no power or authority over him, and he is not going to answer her letter.
we'll
Thank
continue
you
to do so.
very much. You left a message yesterday, or someone on staff left a message.
No, we didn't leave a message.
Reclaiming my
We spoke to
time,
the Chief
reclaiming my
Oversight
time,
Counsel.
reclaiming my time. You did not respond, you left a message. Let us keep going. If a bank identifies suspicious activity related to potential money laundering or sanctions violations by the Trump Organization involving Russian persons, would such a bank have a legal obligation to report it to FinCEN?
Can you repeat your question, please?
If a bank identifies suspicious activity related to potential money laundering or sanctions violations by the Trump Organization involving Russian persons, would such a bank have a legal obligation to report it to FinCEN?
Yeah.
All right, now, he is pulling that bullshit that he didn't hear her, but he heard everything else. So now he's asking her to repeat the question. That's just the tactic used to burn time. And he's going to do it multiple times throughout his testimony to the Democratic members of this committee.
Yes, if a U.S. institution had any suspicious activity, they would be required to file a SAR, which would go to FinCEN.
Thank you. If FinCEN received reports of suspicious activity involving potential violations of money laundering or sanctions involving President Trump, his immediate family, and associates, would FinCEN immediately share it with the Justice Department, Special Counsel Mueller, or other interested law enforcement officials? Or would you generally wait until you received a request from law enforcement for this type of information?
Let me just comment that I can't comment on any specific actions of FinCEN because they're confidential, but I can assure you that FinCEN would respond to any issues revolving the Trumps no different than they would respond to anybody else.
And so the question is whether or not you would, FinCEN would immediately share it with the Justice Department, Special Counsel Mueller, and other interested law enforcement officials. Or again, would you generally wait until you received a request from law enforcement for this type of information?
Again, what I would assure you is that FinCEN would respond to those situations no different than anybody else, and FinCEN and Treasury have cooperated extensively with, as I've said before, the 3 other committees.
If it was widely reported in the...
Let me stop right there. Basically, he's lying because what he basically just told her was that he would not proactively notify the Justice Department or any other department if they came across that information. They would wait for a request from the Justice Department for that information before supplying that information out to him. So he is basically going to be protecting Donald Trump unless something is uncovered outside of his particular agency.
The press that a close advisor of the president was being investigated for money laundering using anonymous shell companies and bank accounts located in Cyprus. Would your department proactively seek to obtain relevant information from foreign financial intelligence units where such activity reportedly took place, or would you wait until a specific law enforcement request came in?
Again, I'm not going to comment on hypothetical situations. FinCEN would handle these situations.
Okay, that's not a hypothetical situation. That's an actual factual situation. And that was widely reported across most news agencies. But apparently, Mr. Mnuchin and his people, well, let's just say him, because his people may have tried to bring this up with him, and he's basically ignoring it.
No different than any other situation.
Mr. Chairman, I respectfully request, pursuant to our memorandum, to ask for additional 5 minutes.
Gentlelady's granted an additional 5 minutes.
Thank you, and I'm not asking for specificity. I'm asking for generally the way you would handle these questions that I have presented to you. Let me continue. Have any Treasury Department employees expressed concerns to you, or are you aware of concern among Treasury staff about the relationship between President Trump and Russia?
No, nobody's expressed those concerns to me.
Given that you were finance chair of the Trump campaign, which is accused of soliciting illegal in-kind contributions from a foreign country, have you recused yourself from any work related to Russia or other foreign countries?
I'm not aware of those accusations that the campaign has taken those types of contributions, nor have I recused myself from anything at this moment, since I believe I have no conflicts.
Thank you. Trump's red line on investigations of his personal finances. In a recent review, President Trump made it clear that he considered any investigation by Robert Mueller into the president's personal finances a red line that shouldn't be crossed. Secretary Mnuchin, have you had any conversations with the president or any official at the White House in which it was directly stated or implied that supporting any investigation into Trump's finances would in some way be crossing a line?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the last part? I heard the first part, just the last part of it.
In a recent review, President Trump made it clear that he considered any investigation by Robert Mueller into the president's personal finances a red line that shouldn't be crossed. Secretary Mnuchin, have you had any conversations with the president or any official at the White House in which it was directly in some way be crossing a line?
No, I've had no conversations along those lines, quite the contrary.
As Secretary of the Treasury, you chair the Interagency Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, known as CFIUS.
Yes, I do.
Which evaluates the sale of U.S. businesses to foreign entities to determine whether such sales undermine our national security. Given the significant pressure President Trump has exerted over government officials with key oversight responsibilities, from Sally Yates to James Comey to Robert Mueller to Jeff Sessions, how can we be sure that you, in your own oversight role, will appropriately review the sale of assets or property to foreign entities by top administration officials? This includes, for example, reviews involving the sale of assets by the White House Communications Director, Anthony Scaramucci, and the President's son-in-law and advisor, Jared Kushner. Can you assure us that you would recommend blocking such a sale in the event it indicates the foreign entity may seek to unduly influence U.S. policy, even if doing so may jeopardize your position as Secretary?
Well, let me assure you, I take my position as CFIUS very seriously. I have not had anybody in any way try to influence me in that position, nor would I let them. And I would use my judgment, as I have, to take the seriousness of the CFIUS responsibility.
And as I understand it, you have such a matter under consideration relative to Mr. Scaramucci and the sale of a huge property to a Chinese interest. Is that correct?
Ranking Member Waters, I think as you're aware, all actions at CFIUS are highly confidential, and it would be inappropriate for me to comment one way or another on any potential transaction and even acknowledge whether any transaction is being reviewed in this public format.
Is it true that Mr. Scaramucci was considered for a position in the administration, but because of this questionable sale that he could not go forward for fear of not being confirmed, but yet he's now in the administration, and does this in any way influence your decision that you have to make about that sale?
Again, I want to acknowledge that I am not making any comment about any potential decision that I may make about a confidential item, but I will say I have not been aware that he was ever considered for a position that required confirmation within the administration.
I am, and so are a lot of people, and Mr. Scaramucci has got, I believe, an investment in Skyfall, which is a financial concern that is, quote unquote, in the process of being sold to Chinese businessmen. And if the Treasury Secretary, who is basically responsible for knowing what's going on with stuff like this, claims that he doesn't know anything about it, that basically just doesn't ring true as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you very much, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady.
All right, so I'm going to, I believe, jump next to Representative Moore, but give me a second. All right, and I'm going to add Nadia Velasquez. She's a House of Representatives member based out of New York. Obviously, she's, well, I shouldn't say obviously, but she's of Puerto Rican descent. But she is going to pose to him a question about killing funding for agencies that provide financing to low-income people, not just housing financing, but consumer credit. And the fact that the Trump budget calls for the complete withdrawal of funding for this particular agency, which in some cases is the lifeblood for lower-income people. Here we go.
Mr. Secretary, in May, Senator Shaheen and I wrote you a letter expressing our concern regarding the administration's decision to eliminate all new program funding for the Treasury Department's CDFI program for fiscal year 2018, and encouraging you and President Trump to reconsider this decision. In June 2017, your own Treasury report states that CDFIs are often the only source of credit and financial services in low-income urban and rural communities. So how do you reconcile the finding of your report and the short-sighted decision of eliminating funding for the program?
Well, thank you for asking that. And I had the opportunity to talk at the Senate yesterday about the same issue. So first, let me say I do support the CDFI program. I think it has been effective. Having said that, we had to make difficult decisions in the context of the president's budget. The overall agenda was to, one, get to a balanced budget, and two, fund military expansion, which is much needed. And this was just a difficult prioritization decision that we've made within the department. I would also comment that as part of our financial report, we did specifically recommend a review of the Community Reinvestment Act and make sure that we meet with consumer advocates, community members, to make sure that that money is being used properly in communities, especially as we're forced to reduce other funding.
Now, it's funny that they want to make sure that that money is being used properly, where they have decided that $688 billion for defense spending is not even enough. And it's been documented that there is so much fraud and waste within the Department of Defense and the defense industry that if they could just recapture that particular waste, it could fund more than 50% of minor programs such as this without batting an eye. And I thought that this was really important. They have decided that they'd rather purchase guns rather than butter for the people. People can't eat guns. We need butter, and that defense budget needs to be pared down. All right, let me jump to Representative Moore, I believe. All right, here's Miss Gwen Moore's questioning of Mr. Mnuchin.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I've lost 5 seconds. Okay, thank you so much, and welcome again, Mr. Secretary. Mr. Secretary, I was really relieved to hear you say on a number of occasions this morning that you are going to be very vigilant on anti-money laundering and counter-terrorist financing compliance. And so given that, I just want to put a few things on the record and find out whether or not you think that certain kinds of investment activity raise concern and warrant heightened scrutiny from regulators and law enforcement. That, of course, our president and his family have engaged in. Investments with parties who have admitted to or have been accused of or convicted of crimes. You think that's problematic, yes or no?
It sounds that way, but it depends on the specifics.
Thank you. Oh, well, I can be specific. How about Felix Sater, who helped build the Soho projects?
I'm not aware of any of the specifics of that, nor would it be appropriate for me to comment.
Treasury
That's not part of my job.
Investments where a parent enterprise lacks a significant or economic basis, do you think that's problematic? Mirror trades.
What was the last part?
Mirror, like in a mirror trade.
I don't know what I'm not connecting this to the terrorist financing
issues. Parties and investments with politically exposed. Well, I could consume all my time, but I would just bring to your attention that there have been, these are not secret things. They're exposed, they're in the news for everybody to read about the partnerships that the Trump family has with people who have been convicted of crimes, who've been associated with Russian mob activity. And I was just wondering, for the record, if you thought that that was problematic.
Again, it's really not part of my job to comment one way or another on that.
Well,
my job is focused on
you're the
terrorist finance.
Secretary of the Treasury. You're part, the SEC, the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. These are all things that you have jurisdiction over.
No, the SEC I have no jurisdiction over.
All right. Let me ask you some more questions. I mentioned in my opening statement, I talked about conflict minerals, and I talked about the disclosures for extractive industries, which you supported. What were the judgments you relied upon to support eliminating disclosures for extractive industries and for, in the Choice Act, eliminating conflict minerals? And so since you seem to need examples, I'll give you examples. Exxon Mobil, as you know, the Treasury just fined them for corrupt dealings with Russia. And conflict minerals, you're familiar with the horrific civil war that's ravaged the Democratic Republic of Congo, and how armed groups took control of the mines, used the proceeds to fund armed conflict, and those minerals ended up in the U.S. consumer market, and thereby we as U.S. citizens have inadvertently funded the killing, rape, and destruction in the DRC. So upon what judgment did you rely to decide that we don't need these provisions?
First of all, I just want to comment on the Exxon. It was not on corrupt dealings, it was on an OFAC violation. In regards to the mineral issue, and again, we think there's a lot of problems, as you pointed out, and we'd be more than happy to follow up with your office and talk more about this issue.
I would like to yield the last minute to the ranking member.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank you, Ms. Moore, for delving into some of the many issues that we are so very concerned about. What Ms. Moore walked through was relationships. President of the United States have a relationship with those who have been jailed, who are known to have mob contacts, who have been involved in criminal activity. And as the treasurer, she was asking you, what do you think about that? And the real question in all of this is whether or not you see your responsibility to make sure that you are protecting the people of this country, respecting the Constitution of the United States, or as it appears that this president is demanding of those in his cabinet and others that they spend their time protecting him. And basically, that's the question.
Time of the gentlelady has expired.
Now, Keith Ellison is going to be the next questioner, and in case you haven't noticed, it looks like the majority of the members on the Democratic side or the minority side of this particular committee are people of color, and specifically African American. And in my opinion, it looks to me like Mr. Mnuchin is showing a lot of contempt for the people on the Democratic side. Now, Keith Ellison is going to get into it specifically with Mnuchin, and this is going to be contentious. And Mr. Mnuchin, in my opinion, is going to insult the intelligence of Mr. Ellison. The ranking member, Maxine Waters, is at the end is going to jump in here and ask Mr. Mnuchin, or ask the chair to allow Mr. Mnuchin to apologize for his obvious insult, and the chair is going to shoot it down. Here we go.
Thank the chair and the ranking member. Secretary Mnuchin, one of the worst moments I experienced in my service in Congress is the financial foreclosure collapse that occurred in 2008. I don't ever want to see it again. I'm sure you agree with me about that. And so I'm concerned about your approach to supervising the mortgage market and making sure that banks that are engaging in issuing mortgages are upholding high standards of ethics. So to that degree, could you explain to me how OneWest, of which you were the CEO, was able to engage in 5,600 violations of foreclosure sale auctions, including backdating in nearly all of the 35,000 foreclosures of homes that you all engaged in?
First of all, let me assure you that I did not make one mortgage during or prior to the mortgage crisis. I took over 3 banks from the FDIC, one of which was the worst originator in the entire world. I'm very proud of the fact that we started loan modifications at IndyMac under the FDIC's control, which we then did. So I take great offense to anybody who calls me the foreclosure king.
Well, and he is a foreclosure king. I did a video on him and exactly the damage that he did to the community in Los Angeles. Now, he is absolutely correct. He did not make one mortgage loan. That the mortgages that the One West Bank and a couple of the other banks that he and his investment group acquired were all originated by people other than himself. And what happened here is first in, first out, last in, last out, and last out normally gets their butts kicked. What went on here was subprime mortgages, a financial instrument was created by these larger banks in order to generate additional loans from people, for people who basically during normal times under normal circumstances would not have been able to qualify for the loans. So what they did was they made a tremendous number of loans to the general public, a lot of people of color, but a lot of white people as well. And then they packaged those loans into financial instruments, which they then in turn sold and got their money out, and they sold them as investment grade financial instruments, which they obviously were not. Mr. Mnuchin and his group came in and took over IndyMac Bank, which is a bank located in Los Angeles, with guarantees from the federal government against losses. So they actually absolutely had no interest in doing any type of major refis on home mortgages, which through, and I'm going to say it, no fault of the people who were in the homes alone, when interest rates went up on these mortgages and when the economy basically went south, 2007, 2008, and there was a severe financial decline and people were losing jobs, losing income, etc., these loans basically went underwater. Mr. Mnuchin and his buddies, since they were guaranteed not to take any losses, basically decided just to foreclose on a bunch of these homes and lied to the people who were paying the mortgages to the point that they were delaying people from putting in the necessary paperwork in order to qualify for refinancing. There were a whole lot of things they did. But one of the things that they did was robo-signing of foreclosure notices. That is, they did not review the documents which they were under oath to review, and they signed forms indicating that they had reviewed the loans, but they didn't do it. And one person, which Mr. Ellison is going to get into, indicated that she was signing like 6,000 foreclosure notices per week. There is no damn way in hell that she could review all of the documents on the 6,000. This thing got so bad that Mr. Mnuchin still maintains a residence in California, and you had over 1,000 people that were out there picketing his residence. And again, I did a video on this if you want to go back in my archives and look it up. But I digress. Let me continue because this is going to get a bit warm, and you'll see for yourself the disrespect that Mr. Mnuchin shows for Representative Ellison.
Whatever issue.
Claiming my time. How that goes.
Whatever issues.
Sir, I allowed you to answer, and I'm
Mr.
reclaiming my
Secretary,
time.
the time belongs to the gentleman from
Look,
this.
I don't have a problem with you answering, but you did answer, so I'm not going to let you filibuster. That's what I won't do.
I'm not filibustering.
No. There's no question.
To your comments.
There's no question before the Secretary.
Okay, wasn't there a...
President Erica Johnson Sec robo-signed 6,000 foreclosure-related paperwork documents per week. Was she under your supervision?
Not directly.
Was she, when you were the CEO, was she employed under you?
She was employed at the bank.
She said in testimony that she robo-signed as many as 6,000 foreclosure-related documents a week. What's your position on robo-signing?
You know, I've answered this extensively.
You have to answer it now, sir.
I'm going to, and you have to listen to me.
No, I don't have to listen to you.
Okay, well...
I asked you a direct question. I'd like an answer.
You're not going to listen to me.
Are you willing to answer the question or not?
Repeat your question.
What is your position on robo-signing?
Again, I don't even think you know what the definition of robo-signing is.
You don't know what I know.
There's not a legal definition.
See, and that's the basic disrespect that he's showing for Mr. Ellison. He's trying to tell him what he knows. And I'm not in the mortgage business, but I am very familiar with financial terms, and robo-signing is a term. Now, it is not a legal term, but it is a term. It's just like stating that, you know, frying something is not the actual thing that you do, but it's a description of food preparation. Well, same thing with robo-signing. It's not an actual legal term, okay, but it's something that everybody knows what it is.
Of robo-signing.
Okay, how about this? Do you deny that under your supervision, robo-signing occurred at the firm that you were the CEO
I
of?
have reported before.
And are you willing?
It was not robo-signing, and I've said this on...
So you deny it, for the record. Thank you.
For the record, I've denied it before.
Right, and you're denying that, well, also for the record and under direct testimony, person under your supervision admitted to it. And for people watching, I'll just let you know, robo-signing is when you have when you're signing documents to get a loan to purchase a home, and you have to review the documents. You have an obligation to review them, and to just sign them as you are going through without reviewing them is not proper and is illegal, because you're swearing that you reviewed those documents. And under the Secretary's supervision, which he claims I don't know anything about robo-signing, that happened to a very severe degree while he was the CEO of One West. Here's another question for you, sir. One West was 9 times as likely to foreclose on a homeowner living in a community of color as originating a mortgage to a borrower living in other communities. Are you concerned about the disproportionate number of people who found themselves in foreclosure at the hands of your company who were persons of color? Where are you at on making sure that there's an equal administration of justice for companies as they engage in foreclosure?
All right, now, I hate to do it, but I got to come to this guy's defense only because IndyMac Bank, or One West, basically served the Black and Hispanic communities. So to be challenged on foreclosing on 9 times more minority mortgage holders than, mortgagees than that are Black than on white mortgagees, that one is a little disingenuous, because that particular bank probably had maybe 10 or 15 times more minority customers than it had white customers, just to keep everything on an even keel.
Let me assure you that we upheld to the strictest amount the rules and regulations as was reviewed by the OCC, the Fed, and the Consumer Protection Bureau, and we did not and would not discriminate in any way.
Well, we'll see.
We'll
Time
see
of the
the
gentleman
question.
has expired.
All right, so, and you know who else I hold responsible for this? The Attorney General in California, who at the time was Kamala Harris. She should have been all over this guy like a wet blanket, but she made a deal with this guy, as well as the Justice Department, i.e. Loretta Lynch's, department. Well, she wasn't the Attorney General at the time, that was Holder. But there were shenanigans going on between the federal government and the banking industry, and Mr. Mnuchin was balls deep in negotiations so that he wouldn't face any jail time. But the situation is still being looked at. And here's Maxine Waters, who's going to jump to Keith Ellison's defense.
Parliamentary inquiry.
For what purpose does the
Mr. Chairman, would you
state your
like-
inquiry?
Thank you. Would you like to give the Secretary an opportunity to apologize to Mr. Ellison for
Not a,
for
that
assuming
is
that he's
not a
stupid to
proper
know what
parliamentary
robocalls are?
inquiry.
Would you like to give him that opportunity?
The time now belongs to the gentleman from Illinois. Mr. Holmgren is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Perhaps could I borrow 10
Yeah,
seconds?
absolutely. I was going to, you can do more than that. I'd like you to have a chance to.
I'd like the record to state that One West Bank was the only bank that concluded the independent foreclosure review, and every single loan was reviewed and was properly compensated. We were also, the only bank to have done all those loan modifications. And I take great offense in that anybody who calls me a foreclosure king or anything else. And Ranking Member, I've had the opportunity to talk about this with you many times before, and this is nothing new, and I'm very proud of One West's record, and I'm not apologizing to anybody because robo-signing is not a legal term, and I was being harassed.
All right, now this guy is a prick because it is documented that his particular bank went out of its way to delay processing refi applications, okay? And he is known in California basically as the foreclosure king. So whether he likes it or not, that's just who he is, okay? And whether he likes it or not, too bad. I swear, I wish that I could face up with this guy because he's full of crap. And what a lot of these guys try to do is they try to steamroll you with their quote-unquote intellect. But if you have the facts and you know what you're talking about, you can cut through the bullshit. And that's exactly what this guy is all about. Making money, stick it in his own pocket, and shooting bullshit out there to everybody else. All right, folks, that's pretty much the end of this. You know, make your thoughts clear. Yeah. Comment if you choose to, share it if you want to, subscribe if it's just something that you think might bring value to you on a regular basis.